So with DHCP, somebody could come and plug a DHCP server into a port on our network if we don't have port security enabled, and they would start handing out IP addresses for clients, and they could give them false information, right? They could give them their address as a gateway, for example. Then all the traffic would pass through their address, and they could be routing that back out appropriately, but it allows the man-in-the-middle attack to occur. So we have some switch security that we can implement that will stop that. It's called DHCP snooping, and the other piece of that is ARP inspection, so that we stop people from spoofing our MAC addresses and stealing our data that way. So we're going to take a look. These are both layer 2 security features found on switches. DHCP snooping essentially acts like putting a firewall on a port or on the switch so that only known DHCP servers are allowed to send out DHCP packets to respond, right? So it's kind of acting like a firewall or an ACL, except it's switch-wide. So it watches for incoming messages on either all ports or some ports, looks for those DHCP messages, and ignores non-DHCP. So for DHCP snooping, we're only looking for DHCP messages. And then it has logic that says either allow or deny. And we can control that by telling it which ports we want DHCP messages to be allowed on and which ones we do not want it to be allowed on. So in this case, we have a trusted switch one, and we have a trusted set of ports, and we have an untrusted set of ports. So the trusted set is ports from another switch. We want to allow DHCP. Ports to the router, we want to allow DHCP. Ports to the DHCP server, we want to allow it. But we don't want to allow it from any other client devices, right? Anybody else plugs in and tries to do a DHCP request, we don't want that to occur. So here's an example of somebody plugging in a rogue DHCP server, and they would put in the wrong gateway so that they would get the traffic. So in case the gateway is supposed to be 10.1.1.1, they're handing out 10.1.1.2, which is their address. The client doesn't know any better. He sends all traffic to 10.1.1.2. 10.1.1.2 likely is routing all their traffic to 10.1.1.1, but they're capturing it all in the middle, doing a man-in-the-middle attack. So we want to be able to stop this, right? So in order to stop it, we will turn on DHCP snooping, and then only DHCP responses. So DHCP requests will be allowed from any port inbound, but the responses will not be sent back out if they don't come from a trusted source port. So here's what that looks like. So we have a PC attacker who is sending DHCP responses. Those are going to be blocked because they didn't come from a valid port. So this is just showing the legitimate DHCP client with a DHCP binding. The traffic would be allowed, the DHCP traffic would be allowed because the response came from a trusted port. It would be allowed to go back to the client. If it was not a trusted port, it would not be allowed to go back to the client. So the normal user, he's allowed to get his DHCP. He does a DHCP request. The DHCP server can respond. This guy is trying to respond. However, because DHCP snooping is looking for 10.1.0.3, which is 10.1.0.3, 172.16.2.101, that is not going to be allowed because it didn't come from a valid DHCP server. It also stops PC2 from releasing addresses from PC1. So PC1 has an address. In this case, that's what we're looking at here. PC2 is trying to send a release to free up the address from PC1 to the DHCP server. There's a table that says that that IP address is associated with this port. The only release would be allowed from that port, not from this other port. Another security mechanism stopping somebody from stealing your IP address. So we're gonna take a look at how it would be configured here. So we have gig 102, which has our DHCP relay agent on it, and then we have our untrusted ports over here, PC1, PC2. DHCP server resides out here. So we turn on globally IP DHCP snooping. We then are turning it on VLAN 11. And then no IP DHCP snooping information option. So there's no options. And then we have a trusted port, gig 102. And that's the only one we're going to allow DHCP on. So this is what it looks like when we do a show. So DHCP snooping is enabled. It's operational on VLAN 11. We're not inserting option 82. That's disabled, so that's what this command did here. Oops. And then the interface trusted, we have just gig 102 as a trusted interface. Now we have some other commands that we can run. So error disable recovery cause DHCP rate limit. That will let us set a rate limit on a port, and based on that rate limit, we'll disable that port, error disable that report. And the timer for this is intervals 30 seconds. So in this case, if we see 10 DHCP packets on this port in 30 seconds, the port will go into an error disable state. This one's a rate limit of 2. So if it receives 2 DHCP packets in 30 seconds, it's going to go to an error disabled state. And we can see that by doing show IP DHCP snooping. We see that this is a trusted port, rate limit of 10 packets per second over a 30-second interval, and then, or whatever interval. And 102 is rate limited to 2 packets per second. So if a DHCP server comes online, for example, over here, it will not be allowed if it sends more than the rate limited DHCP packets per second, 10 on port 2 or 3 on port, or 2 on port 3. DHCP snooping should be enabled in your network if you don't want rogue DHCP servers. So this is looking at the ARP table after the DHCP. So after we do DHCP, ARP tables from PC1 and ARP from DC router 2 are going to be known by the switch, right? Because there was communications. Both of them can write the MAC address table. R2 knows about this IP with this MAC address. Switch 2 knows about this IP with this MAC address. This is how the second part of DHCP snooping works that stops somebody from releasing your address and trying to steal it. Because the switch and the router both know the MAC address. So in this case, we have PCA here trying to do an ARP reply as MAC-A, but this is the IP address of MAC-1. That will not be allowed because this guy is trying to steal that IP address. So a gratuitous ARP is an ARP that's not really from you. So the man in the middle here, PCA, is trying to spoof being this guy by sending an ARP that says he is 172.16.2.101. So the switch and the router, in this case the router over here, is going, okay, wait, that's not correct. That's supposed to be Mac 1, you're Mac A. If the switch was not disallowing gratuitous ARPs, the switch could, or the router could be fooled into thinking that Mac A was 172.16.2.101. So then all traffic that was supposed to be going to Mac 1 will actually be going to PCA. So we have the ability to filter ARP based on the DHCP snooping table, because the DHCP snooping table is keeping track of who has what IP address. So the MAC to IP address with the interface. So when this guy tries to send his ARP in, it goes, no, sorry, not correct. The DHCP snooping table has Mac 1. I'm not taking your information. So this is just showing you that checks the source MAC address to confirm that it is in fact going to the right IP. So we turn on ARP inspection. Again, we have a trusted port and untrusted for our DHCP snooping. And here's how we turn that on. So we did IP ARP inspection VLAN 11, and on gig 102, this trusted interface over here, we're doing an ARP inspection trust. So here's what this looks like for supporting DHCP snooping with ARP inspection. ARP inspection VLAN 11, and then on the interface itself, we're trusting. And it will then show us, if we look at ARP inspection, the number of forwarded packets, the number of dropped packets that didn't match. And then we can also do a show IP DHCP snooping binding, and it will show us the MAC address and the IP address that belongs to it. And that's the table it's using to determine whether or not to answer to an ARP request. So here's an ARP attack. We see a log entry. So in this case, this MAC address tried to steal this IP, which was not in the table, right? 172.16.2.101 is this MAC address, not this MAC address. Therefore, those packets would be dropped. Not allowing that attack to occur. And we can also rate limit the ARP inspection just like we did the DHCP snooping. So if we receive more ARPs on a port than we expect, then it will disable the port. And here's what that looks like if we look at the IP ARP inspection show command. Shows us our rate and our burst interval for our trusted ports as well as our untrusted ports. So we do have some test commands basically that allow us to check to see if the MAC address is good. So our inspection, we're validating the source MAC. We can also validate destination MAC or IP. Most often it's going to be source MAC. And then you show your inspection. This eliminates rogue DHCP servers and eliminates gratuitous ARPs, which allow somebody could allow somebody to hijack an IP address by sending it to their MAC address as opposed to the original MAC address. Both essentially stopping man in the middle attacks or redirection reflection attacks. Keeping in mind that this does put additional overhead on the switch, so you want to make sure you're sizing your switch accordingly. All right, any questions on DHCP or ARP inspections? If not,